My mom wanted to be the only woman in my life. And when I finally found out why, I made sure she'd be alone in hers. I was in college when I finally got a girlfriend. Lucy was beautiful, and she looked like a cinnamon roll. We dated for 6 months before I worked up the courage to bring her home to meet my mom. "It'll be fine," she said, squeezing my hand. "Moms always love me." Mom opened her door with a smile until she saw Lucy. "Oh," Mom's smile froze. "You didn't tell me you were bringing someone." Lucy tried to break the tension. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Mrs." "I'm sure it is," Mom cut her off. Then she turned to me, her voice getting sweeter. "Honey, can I talk to you for just a second? Alone?" Her grip on my arm was too tight. "She's not right for you. Tell her you made a mistake. Tell her to leave." "Mom, no. We've been together 6 months." She started crying. "If you loved me, you'd understand. No one will ever love you like I do." I'd heard this speech before. But this time, something felt different. Maybe it was knowing Lucy was waiting outside. Maybe it was the way Mom's tears turned on so fast. I went back to the living room where Lucy was still standing by the door. "We should go," I said quietly. Mom followed me out. "Oh, leaving already? I guess she's more important than your mother now." In the car, Lucy was quiet for a minute before she started crying. "Your mom asked me how much money my parents make," she said. "When you were in the kitchen, she asked if I was on birth control. She asked if I was trying to trap you." I sat there frozen as Lucy kept talking through her tears. "She said I should leave you alone because you already have someone who loves you. The thing is, I'd been making excuses for my mom my whole life. See, my dad left when I was 10. I remembered him saying, 'I can't compete with you for her attention anymore.' I didn't understand it then, but after he left, Mom would cry in my bed every night, holding me too tight, whispering, 'You're all I have left. You're the man of the house now.' I gave up my first real girlfriend at 14 because Mom threatened to hurt herself. I quit band because Mom said the female teacher was trying to steal me. On prom night, she faked chest pain so I'd stay home with her instead. 26 years of being her emotional husband instead of her son. But watching Lucy cry in my car, I finally understood what my dad meant. This wasn't love. This was sickness. I walked back up to her door. "Are you in love with me?" I asked. Her eyes nearly popped out of her head. "What? Is that why you used to come into my room at night to cuddle? Is that why you can't let me have a girlfriend?" "That's ridiculous!" Slam. I closed the door in her face when I realized she wasn't going to be honest. For 3 days, I didn't answer Mom's calls, or her voice increasingly psych ward-worthy voice notes. I knew that when I finally confronted her, all hell would break loose. But first, I did something I should have done years ago. I called my dad. We met at a coffee shop downtown. He looked older, grayer. We sat there awkwardly for a minute before he asked, "Does your mother know I'm here?" "No," I responded, and he immediately went rigid. "I figured this call would come eventually," he mumbled. "What did she do?" "How did you know it was about Mom?" He gave me this sad smile. "You haven't called me in over 10 years. The only reason you'd call now is if you finally saw what I saw. She met Lucy, my girlfriend. Mom made her cry, and I realized I couldn't finish. That it's not normal," he finished for me. He stirred his coffee for a long time. "Your mother was obsessed with you from the day you were born. You weren't our son, you were her son. She'd remind me of that dozens of times a day. That's weird, but when you were 8, I found her in your bed again, holding you like..." He paused. "Like I used to hold her. I told her it needed to stop. That's when she threatened to tell everyone I was abusing you if I tried to take you away." My stomach turned. "So you just left?" "I tried to get custody. But who believes the father when the mother cries abuse? I thought at least if I left, you'd have a chance at being normal when you got older." I was wrong. That's when Lucy and I made our decision. We were leaving, not just the city, the state. I sent Mom just one text. "Come over tomorrow at 2 p.m. We need to talk." She showed up 2 hours early, as expected. But her smile disappeared when she saw the U-Haul truck. "What the hell is this?" Mom's voice was already shaking. "Where are you going?" "Away from you," I said. "Forever. Dad told me everything. About what you did to him. About what you've been doing to me." She dropped to her knees in our doorway. "Please, you're all I have left," my mom begged. I looked down at her. This woman who'd stolen my childhood, ruined every relationship. And for the first time in my life, I felt disgust. "That's not my problem anymore. By the way," Lucy chimed in calmly, "I'm a mandatory reporter. And he told me everything about when he was 8. Mom froze. "You wouldn't..." That's when we heard the knock. 3 loud bangs on the door. "You called them?" she whispered. Lucy smiled. The 2 officers stepped inside, and I watched Mom's face change from desperate pleading to something close to panic. The taller one introduced himself as Officer Marino and asked all 3 of us for identification. His partner, a younger guy with a crew cut, pulled out a notebook and started writing down our names. Officer Marino looked at me and Lucy, then at Mom, still kneeling in the doorway. He asked if we could separate into different rooms so he could get statements from each of us individually. Lucy went into the bedroom with the younger officer. Mom got sent to the kitchen with Officer Marino. I stayed in the living room with all the packed boxes and waited. Through the thin walls, I could hear Mom's voice getting louder, then quieter, then louder again. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The younger officer came back after about 10 minutes and asked me to walk him through everything that happened today. I told him about the text message saying 2 p.m., about Mom showing up at noon, about what she said when she saw the U-Haul. He wrote it all down without looking up from his notebook. When Officer Marino brought Mom out of the kitchen, her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying anymore. She tried to explain that she was just a concerned mother who came to visit her son. Officer Marino asked her why she arrived 2 hours before the time I told her to come. Mom opened her mouth, closed it, then said something about wanting to help us pack. Officer Marino looked at the U-Haul truck that was already completely loaded. He asked her if she had permission to be here right now. Mom looked at me like I was supposed to save her. I didn't say anything. Officer Marino told her this was a verbal trespass warning. He said she needed to leave the property right now and not come back unless I gave her clear permission in writing. Mom started to argue, but he cut her off and said if she refused to leave, he would arrest her for trespassing. She grabbed her purse from where she'd dropped it by the door and walked out to her car without looking at me. I watched through the window as she sat in the driver's seat for a minute before finally starting the engine and backing out of the parking lot. After Mom's car disappeared down the street, Officer Marino and his partner spent the next 20 minutes going through everything with me and Lucy. They photographed the U-Haul truck. They wrote down the timeline of Mom's harassment starting from when I first brought Lucy home. Lucy told them about the kitchen interrogation, about Mom asking if she was on birth control, about Mom saying I already had someone who loved me. The younger officer's pen moved faster across his notebook. Officer Marino asked if Mom had been contacting me a lot recently. I pulled out my phone and showed him the call log. 40 missed calls in 3 days. He nodded slowly and handed me his card. He said given the pattern he was seeing, I should seriously think about filing for a restraining order. He said what Mom was doing counted as harassment, and it was only getting worse. His partner added that the early arrival today, combined with everything else, showed she wasn't respecting boundaries. They gave me the incident report number and told me to keep all the text messages and voicemails as evidence. Then they left and the apartment got really quiet. Lucy and I sat on the couch surrounded by boxes, both of us shaking from adrenaline that had nowhere to go anymore. She asked if I was okay. I realized I actually was. For the first time in days, maybe years, I felt like I'd taken action instead of just reacting to whatever Mom threw at me. Lucy leaned against my shoulder and we sat there for a while without talking. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom, but I didn't open it. Lucy saw the notification and squeezed my hand. That night, we pulled out my laptop and started researching restraining orders. We found legal aid websites and victim advocacy resources. I read through the criteria for what counted as harassment. The list included obsessive calling, showing up uninvited, threats of self-harm to control someone's behavior, and interference with relationships. It was like someone had written a description of my entire life with Mom. Lucy pulled up a page about emotional abuse and read parts of it out loud. The section on reasonable fear explained that you didn't need to be physically threatened to get protection. Years of manipulation and control counted. The early arrival today after being told 2 p.m. counted. The 43 messages in 1 week definitely counted. We bookmarked everything, and I felt something shift in my chest, like maybe this wasn't just me being dramatic or ungrateful like Mom always said. I woke up the next morning and started going through my phone systematically. I took screenshots of every voicemail, every text message, every email Mom had sent over the past week. The first few were loving, calling me honey and sweetheart. Then they shifted to asking why I wasn't responding. Then they got manipulative, saying she couldn't sleep and needed to talk to me. Then they turned angry, accusing me of choosing Lucy over family. The last few mentioned self-harm, saying she didn't know what she'd do if I abandoned her. 43 messages total. Seeing them all lined up like that, one after another, made the pattern impossible to ignore. This wasn't normal mother-son communication. This was someone obsessed and spiraling. I saved everything to a folder on my laptop and backed it up to the cloud. Lucy sat with me at the kitchen table while I wrote out a timeline of events. I started with the day I brought her home to meet Mom 6 months ago. I included specific dates for every incident I could remember. The kitchen interrogation where Mom asked about birth control. The phone calls that came every hour after we left. The messages that got increasingly desperate. The surprise visit yesterday at noon when I'd said 2 p.m. Lucy helped me remember exact quotes from Mom's messages. We included the police incident report number from yesterday. By the time we finished, it was 5 pages long, and the pattern of escalating harassment was crystal clear. Each incident built on the last one. Each boundary Mom crossed made the next violation easier. My phone rang and Dad's name showed up on the screen. I answered and he asked how I was holding up after yesterday. I told him we were working on getting a restraining order. His voice changed, got lighter somehow. He said he was relieved I was taking legal action. Then he offered to write a declaration about Mom's past behavior and the threats she made during the custody battle that never happened. He said he kept detailed notes from back then, dates and times and exact words Mom used when she threatened to accuse him of abuse if he tried to take me. I asked if he'd really be willing to put that in writing. He said absolutely. He should have done it years ago. We agreed he'd email me the declaration by tomorrow morning. Lucy and I drove downtown to the legal aid office the next day. We had to wait almost an hour before meeting with Gracelyn Peterson, an attorney who handled domestic abuse cases. She was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. We sat in her small office and she reviewed our documentation, the timeline, the screenshots, the police report. She asked questions about specific incidents and took notes. Then she explained that emotional abuse and harassment definitely qualified for restraining orders in our state. She said the police report and witness statements from Lucy made our case even stronger. Having Dad's declaration about the historical pattern would help too. I felt my shoulders relax for the first time since we'd walked in. Gracelyn walked us through something called the ex parte process. She said I could file for an emergency temporary restraining order today. If the judge granted it, there would be a hearing in about 2 weeks where Mom could respond and tell her side. But the temporary order would go into effect immediately once Mom got served with the papers. That meant she'd have to stay away from me right away, not in 2 weeks. Gracelyn explained that Mom would be prohibited from contacting me in any way, directly or through other people. She'd have to stay at least 100 yards away from me, my home, my school, and my work. If she violated the order, she could be arrested. I looked at Lucy and she nodded. We were doing this. I told Gracelyn I wanted to file today. Gracelyn pulled out a thick stack of forms and spread them across her desk. She explained each section while I picked up the pen, my hand already feeling heavy. The petition asked for specific incidents with dates and descriptions. I started with the most recent stuff, the kitchen interrogation Lucy described, then worked backward through the years. Writing about prom night felt weird, like I was telling someone else's story. I had to describe how Mom faked chest pains and called an ambulance, how I stayed home in my rented tux while my date went alone. The pen cramped my hand as I wrote about the band teacher Mom accused of inappropriate behavior, forcing me to quit something I actually loved. Each incident looked smaller when reduced to legal language on these official forms, but together they formed a pattern I couldn't ignore anymore. My handwriting got messier as I filled page after page, incidents from middle school and high school and college all bleeding together into one long record of Mom controlling my life. Gracelyn checked each page as I finished, nodding and making notes in the margins about which details strengthened the case. Lucy sat beside me and started her own declaration form. She wrote in neat print, describing exactly what Mom said in the kitchen that first day. Her professional voice came through even in writing as she explained how Mom's questions about birth control and money and trapping me met the legal criteria for harassment. She included specific quotes, Mom's tone of voice, the way she blocked the kitchen doorway. Lucy's training as a mandatory reporter showed in how she documented everything, clinical and detailed and impossible to dismiss. She described feeling threatened and uncomfortable, how Mom's behavior toward me raised red flags about emotional abuse. Reading over her shoulder made me realize how serious this all looked from the outside, how someone trained to spot abuse patterns saw exactly what I'd been making excuses for my whole life. Lucy signed and dated the bottom of her declaration, then Gracelyn added it to our growing file of evidence. We drove downtown to the courthouse and found parking in a garage 2 blocks away. The courthouse was this old stone building with metal detectors at the entrance. We went through security and found the clerk's office on the 2nd floor. Gracelyn handed our petition to the clerk behind the counter, a middle-aged woman who barely looked up as she stamped received on each page. The clerk told us the judge would review it tonight, and we should hear back within 24 hours about whether the temporary order was granted. Gracelyn explained that if approved, the order would take effect immediately once Mom got served with the papers. I signed the final page while the clerk made copies, my signature looking shaky next to Lucy's steady print. Walking out of the courthouse felt surreal, like I'd just set something in motion I couldn't stop. I felt powerful and scared at the same time. This made everything official. There was no taking it back now. The paperwork was filed, and a judge would decide if my mom was dangerous enough to legally keep away from me. That evening, I tackled a practical problem I'd been avoiding. Mom was the account holder on our shared phone plan, had been since I was 16 and got my first cell phone. I couldn't risk her using that access to track my location or cut off my service right when I needed it most. Lucy and I went to the phone store near campus, and I opened a completely new plan under my name. The activation fees hurt, almost $200 I didn't really have. The early termination penalty from Mom's plan was another $150. But I handed over my credit card anyway because I couldn't let Mom have any way to find me or control my communication. The store employee transferred my number to the new account, and I watched my phone reboot with the new carrier. Lucy added her line to my plan so we'd be on the same account, splitting the monthly cost. I sent Mom one text from my newly independent number saying I'd moved to a different plan and she was no longer the account holder. Then I turned off my phone for the rest of the night. I turned my phone back on the next morning and immediately regretted it. Mom's texts had been arriving every 30 minutes all night long. The early ones were apologies, saying she was sorry for overreacting and could we please just talk. Then they shifted to accusations, claiming Lucy had brainwashed me and I was making the biggest mistake of my life. Around midnight, the messages got desperate, saying she couldn't sleep and couldn't eat and didn't know what she'd do without me. The last one came through at 4 a.m. and just said, "If you really leave me, I don't know what I'll do." I read that one 3 times, recognizing the implied threat I'd heard so many times before. But this time, instead of calling her back, I took a screenshot. Then I screenshotted all 43 messages from the night and forwarded them to Gracelyn with a note saying the harassment was escalating. Gracelyn responded within an hour saying this supported our petition perfectly and she'd include it in any follow-up with the judge. I blocked Mom's number after that, watching her contact disappear from my recent calls. The courthouse called the next afternoon while I was in class. I saw the missed call and voicemail during my break, and my hands shook as I listened to the message. The judge had granted the temporary restraining order. It was ready for pickup at the clerk's office. I called Gracelyn immediately and she met me at the courthouse an hour later. She explained that now we needed to have Mom officially served with the papers, which would inform her about the order and the hearing date in 2 weeks. The order wouldn't be enforceable until Mom received it and knew the terms. Gracelyn recommended using a professional process server rather than having the sheriff do it, saying it was faster and more reliable. She gave me contact information for a service she'd used before. I thanked her and headed to the clerk's office to pick up my copy of the signed order. I retrieved the signed order from the courthouse clerk, my hands shaking as I held the official document. The judge's signature was right there at the bottom in blue ink. I read through the findings section where the judge wrote there was reasonable apprehension of harm based on the evidence we presented. Seeing those words on an official court document made something shift in my chest. A judge had reviewed everything, all those incidents I'd been making excuses for, and determined Mom was dangerous. The order listed specific terms. Mom had to stay at least 100 yards away from me, my home, my school, and my work. She was prohibited from contacting me directly or through other people. If she violated any terms, she could be arrested immediately. The order was good for 2 weeks until the full hearing where Mom could present her side. But for now, this piece of paper said I had the legal right to be safe from her. I folded it carefully and put it in my backpack, then called the process server Gracelyn recommended. We hired a professional process server that same afternoon, a guy who did this full-time for lawyers around the city. He charged $75 to deliver the restraining order to Mom at her house. I gave him Mom's address and a physical description, hoping this would be simple and drama-free. The server said he'd try that evening and call me with an update. Lucy and I went home and tried to focus on normal things like homework and dinner, but I kept checking my phone. The server called around 8 p.m. and said he'd been to Mom's house twice. Her car was in the driveway both times, but she wouldn't answer the door. He could see lights on inside and heard movement, but she refused to come to the door. Service wasn't completed. He said he'd try again tomorrow with a different approach, maybe catch her coming or going. I thanked him and hung up, frustrated that even this couldn't be simple. Mom was avoiding the papers, probably knowing they were coming, making this process drag out longer. My email dinged late that night and I saw Dad's name in my inbox. He'd sent scanned copies of notes he kept when I was 8, 9, and 10 years old. The files were pages and pages of his careful handwriting, dates and times and descriptions of Mom's behavior. I opened the first one and saw an entry from when I was 8. Dad wrote that he found Mom in my bed again at 2 a.m., holding me while I slept. He confronted her the next morning and she said I needed her. Another entry described how Mom told him I was her son, not ours, and he had no say in how she parented me. The entries from when I was 9 showed the pattern getting worse. Mom wouldn't let Dad take me anywhere alone. She accused him of trying to turn me against her. The entries from when I was 10 were the most damaging. Dad documented Mom's exact threats about claiming he abused me if he tried to get custody. He wrote down her words, how she said no one would believe him over a crying mother. Reading these notes made everything Dad told me at the coffee shop feel more real. He'd been documenting this for years, probably hoping he'd need it someday. I had my first appointment with Francine the next morning at her office across town. Lucy drove me because I was too nervous to focus on directions. Francine's office was in a small professional building, her waiting room decorated with calm colors and soft chairs. She came out to greet me right on time, a woman in her 50s with gray hair and a warm smile. We sat in her office and she asked me to tell her what brought me in. I started with the recent stuff, meeting Lucy and Mom's reaction, but Francine gently guided me back further. She asked about my childhood, about Mom's behavior after Dad left, about how I felt growing up. I told her about the bed cuddling and the girlfriend sabotage and the constant need for my attention. Francine listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes. Then she said something that made my whole body go still. She used the term emotional incest to describe what Mom did. She explained it meant treating a child like a romantic partner, making them meet emotional needs that should come from an adult relationship. Hearing that term applied to my life felt like validation and grief crashing over me at the same time. Validation because someone with professional training saw it too. Grief because it meant my childhood was even more messed up than I'd let myself believe. 3 days after the temporary order was granted, I was walking out of my psychology lecture when I saw her. Mom stood by the bike racks outside the building, scanning faces as students poured through the doors. My stomach dropped and I froze on the steps. She spotted me and started walking forward with her arms outstretched like she expected a hug. I backed up into another student and pulled out my phone to call campus security. Mom kept coming closer, calling my name, saying she just wanted to talk for 5 minutes. Other students were staring now and I felt my face get hot. I told her to leave and that she was breaking the restraining order. She said the order was stupid and I was being dramatic. A guy in a security uniform jogged over from the parking lot before Mom could get within 10 feet of me. He stepped between us and asked Mom to stop. She tried to go around him, but he moved to block her again. He asked for her name and she refused to give it, saying this was between her and her son. The security officer, whose name tag said Apollo, asked me if I wanted this person removed from campus. I said yes, and that there was a restraining order. Mom's face went red and she started yelling that I was ruining her life over nothing. Apollo called for backup on his radio, and another officer arrived within 2 minutes. They walked Mom to the parking lot while she kept turning back to shout at me. Apollo came back and asked me to file an incident report at the security office. I spent 40 minutes filling out forms and giving statements. Apollo printed everything and gave me copies, explaining I should send these to my lawyer as proof Mom violated the order. I forwarded the whole report to Graceland before I even left the building. That night, Lucy came home from her internship and dropped her bag by the door without saying anything. She sat on our couch and just stared at the wall for a full minute. I asked what was wrong and she said she was tired. Not regular tired, but the kind that goes into your bones. She admitted she was scared because she thought the restraining order would stop Mom, but it clearly didn't. Lucy said she didn't sign up to be my bodyguard every single day, and she felt bad for thinking that, but it was true. I sat next to her and we had the most honest talk we'd had in weeks. I told her she didn't have to protect me all the time, and that we could share this mess instead of her carrying it alone. She started crying and said she felt like she had to be strong for both of us. We agreed to split things differently going forward. If Mom showed up, we'd both call the police instead of Lucy handling everything. If I needed to vent, I could do it without Lucy having to fix the problem. We ordered pizza and fell asleep on the couch watching some dumb comedy neither of us really paid attention to. The process server tried again 2 days later, but Mom still wouldn't answer her door. Graceland said we needed a different approach because Mom was clearly avoiding service on purpose. She arranged for the sheriff's office to handle it since they have more authority and ways to make sure someone gets served. Deputy Evan Coleman was assigned to our case, and he called me to confirm Mom's address and typical schedule. He said he'd go to her house with his body camera running, so there would be video proof of the service. The next afternoon, Deputy Coleman drove to Mom's house right when a delivery truck pulled up. Mom opened the door expecting a package, and Deputy Coleman stepped forward with the restraining order papers in his hand. He identified himself and handed Mom the documents before she could close the door. She took them automatically, and then realized what they were. Deputy Coleman's body camera caught everything that happened next. Graceland got a copy of the footage and sent it to me with a warning that it might be hard to watch. I played the video on my laptop with Lucy sitting next to me. The footage showed Mom's face changing from confused to angry in about 2 seconds. She started screaming that I was ruining her life and that she didn't do anything wrong. Deputy Coleman stayed calm and professional, not reacting to her yelling at all. Mom said Lucy poisoned me against her and that I was her baby and she had rights. Her voice got higher and more frantic with each sentence. She called me ungrateful and said I'd regret this. Deputy Coleman waited for her to finish and then explained the terms of the restraining order in simple language. He told her she couldn't contact me in any way, couldn't come within 100 yards of me, and any violation would result in her arrest. Mom tried to argue, but Deputy Coleman just repeated the information and walked back to his car. The video showed Mom standing in her doorway holding the papers and crying before the footage cut off. 3 days before the hearing, Graceland called to tell me Mom had filed a response through a lawyer she hired. Graceland forwarded me the court documents and I read them sitting at my kitchen table. Mom's response said I was an ungrateful son who abandoned his loving mother without reason. It claimed she never behaved inappropriately and that I was making up stories because Lucy turned me against her. The response painted Mom as a victim of my sudden rejection and said she was heartbroken by false accusations. Reading her version of events made me feel sick because she actually believed her own lies. There was no mention of the bedroom cuddling or the girlfriend sabotage or any of the things that actually happened. Her lawyer wrote it all in legal language that made Mom sound like a saint and me sound like a monster. I sent the response to Dad and he called me 20 minutes later. He said Mom used the exact same strategy when he tried to leave, playing the victim and denying everything. He reminded me that we had evidence and witnesses and that her denials wouldn't hold up in court. Francine gave me a homework assignment during our next session. She wanted me to write a letter to Mom saying everything I never got to say, but I wouldn't actually send it. The letter was just for me, a way to get all the feelings out without giving Mom more ammunition. I sat down that night with a blank document on my laptop and just stared at it for 10 minutes. Finally, I started typing. I wrote that she treated me like a husband instead of a son, and that wasn't okay. I wrote about the nights she came to my bed and how wrong that felt, even when I was too young to understand why. I wrote about the girlfriends she drove away and the activities she made me quit. I wrote that loving someone doesn't mean owning them and that she never learned the difference. The words came faster as I kept going, years of anger and hurt pouring onto the screen. I wrote that I deserved a mother who wanted me to grow up and have my own life, not one who needed me to stay small and dependent forever. By the time I finished, the letter was 3 pages long and I was crying. I saved it in a folder on my computer where Mom would never see it. Writing those words felt scary and freeing at the same time, like I was finally admitting the truth out loud, even if no one else would read it. Dad and I met for lunch at a diner exactly halfway between our two cities. The drive took me an hour and 15 minutes, and I spent the whole time feeling nervous. We hadn't seen each other face to face in over 10 years, just that one coffee shop meeting a few weeks ago. He was already in a booth when I arrived, drinking coffee and looking almost as nervous as I felt. We ordered burgers and didn't talk about anything important for the first 20 minutes, just safe topics like work and weather. Finally, Dad said we should probably discuss the elephant in the room. We agreed we wanted to rebuild our relationship, but we needed boundaries to make it work. He suggested monthly phone calls to start, nothing too intense or demanding. I said I didn't want to talk about Mom unless it was legally necessary for the case. Dad agreed and added that he wouldn't push me to forgive him faster than I was ready. We decided I would set the pace for everything, and he would follow my lead. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation with hugs and tears, just two people carefully figuring out how to be in each other's lives again. The check came and Dad paid for both meals. We stood in the parking lot afterward and shook hands, which felt formal but also right for where we were. He said to call him if I needed anything before the hearing. I drove home feeling lighter than I expected. The financial reality of everything hit me hard that week when I sat down with my laptop and a calculator. First month's rent and security deposit for the new apartment was $2,400. The moving truck rental was $300. Legal fees, even with Graceland's help through legal aid, were adding up to around $500 for filing fees and process servers. I was looking at over $3,000 in costs, and my savings account had $1,800. Lucy and I spread all our bills and bank statements across the kitchen table and created the most bare-bones budget we could manage. We cut streaming services, stopped eating out completely, and started buying the cheapest groceries we could find. I applied for part-time jobs at 3 different places in our new city, hoping to start working as soon as we moved. Lucy dropped her elective class so she could pick up more hours at her internship. We figured if we both worked extra and lived super cheap for a few months, we could cover everything without going into debt. It wasn't fun or comfortable, but it was doable if we both committed. Mom posted on Facebook 5 days before the hearing, and I only found out because my cousin sent me a screenshot. The post said I had turned my back on family and that she was heartbroken by false accusations I was making. She tagged 12 relatives, including aunts, uncles, and cousins I barely knew. I immediately opened Facebook on my phone and started taking screenshots of everything before people could comment. Mom's post already had 15 comments from her friends saying they couldn't believe I would do this to her. Several people wrote that kids these days have no respect and that Mom deserved better. One of her coworkers commented that she'd been so worried about Mom lately, and this explained why she seemed so sad. I saved every single screenshot in a folder and sent them all to Graceland. She replied that this was perfect evidence of Mom trying to manipulate our extended family and paint herself as the victim. She said judges don't look kindly on parties who try to wage social media campaigns during restraining order cases. I blocked Mom on Facebook and set my profile to private so she couldn't see anything I posted. 3 of my relatives texted me asking what was going on, and I didn't respond to any of them. My second therapy session with Francine focused completely on preparing for the hearing. She said court would be stressful, and Mom would probably try to make me feel guilty or get an emotional reaction. Francine taught me grounding techniques for managing anxiety, like focusing on 5 things I could see, 4 things I could touch, 3 things I could hear. We practiced how to stay calm if Mom started crying or yelling in court. She reminded me to breathe slowly and take my time answering questions. Francine said it was okay to pause and collect my thoughts instead of rushing to respond. We did a practice run where she pretended to be Mom's lawyer, asking me hostile questions, and I practiced staying factual instead of defensive. She told me to stick to specific examples and avoid generalizations like she always or she never, because those were easier to argue against. By the end of the session, I felt more prepared, but I still dreaded the actual confrontation. Francine said that was normal, and that feeling nervous didn't mean I was going to fail. I left her office with a printed list of grounding techniques in my pocket, and the hearing date circled on my phone calendar in red. That night, Lucy and I were going over our budget spreadsheet for the 3rd time when I made a stupid suggestion. I told her maybe she should drop her elective class and pick up more hours at her internship since we needed every dollar we could get. She stopped typing and looked at me with this expression I'd never seen before. She said she wasn't the only one making sacrifices and that I had no right to tell her how to manage her school schedule. I felt my face get hot because she was right, but I was too stressed to admit it. We sat there in silence for maybe 10 minutes before I apologized and she apologized, and we pulled the laptop between us to revise the budget together. We found cuts we could both make without either of us giving up more than the other. Lucy circled 3 expenses we could eliminate, and I found 2 subscriptions I'd forgotten about that we could cancel immediately. Within an hour, we had a plan that felt fair, and we ordered cheap pizza to celebrate not being mad at each other anymore. 2 days before the hearing, Gracelyn asked me to come to her office for a final prep session. She had printed copies of all our evidence and laid them out on her conference table in the order she planned to present them. She walked me through every question she would ask and every question Mom's lawyer might ask during cross-examination. Gracelyn told me to stick to specific facts and avoid saying things like always or never because those were easy to argue against. She coached me to answer only what was asked without over-explaining or getting defensive, even if the questions made me angry. We did practice runs where she pretended to be Mom's lawyer, asking hostile questions about whether I was exaggerating or misremembering events. She reminded me to pause and breathe before answering, instead of rushing to defend myself. Gracelyn said the judge would be watching my demeanor as much as listening to my words, so staying calm and factual was more important than being emotional or dramatic. By the end of the session, I felt more prepared, but my stomach still twisted every time I thought about sitting across from Mom in court. I spent that evening assembling a binder with tabbed sections for every piece of evidence we had. The first section held the police reports from when Officer Marino came to my apartment and when campus security removed Mom from campus. The second section had screenshots of all 43 messages Mom sent over 1 week with the timestamps visible. The third section contained Dad's declaration about Mom's behavior when I was 8 and the threats she made when he tried to leave. The fourth section held Lucy's witness statement describing the kitchen interrogation and why she filed the mandatory report. The fifth section had the campus security incident report from when Mom showed up at my psychology building. I used colored tabs to mark each section and put page numbers on everything, so Gracelyn could reference specific documents quickly. Having everything organized in my hands made me feel slightly less powerless about tomorrow. I could point to concrete evidence instead of just telling my story and hoping someone believed me. The night before court, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and running through every possible scenario in my head. I imagined Mom crying on the stand and the judge believing her version of events. I imagined her lawyer making me look like an ungrateful son who abandoned his loving mother. I imagined the judge dismissing the whole case and Mom showing up at our apartment that same night. Around 3 a.m, I woke up from a nightmare where Mom convinced the judge I was lying about everything, and the judge ordered me to move back home with her. Lucy woke up when I jerked awake and she pulled me close without saying anything. She held me until my breathing slowed down and reminded me we had evidence and truth on our side. She said Mom could cry and perform all she wanted, but the documentation didn't lie. Lucy stayed awake with me for another hour going over the evidence again until I felt calm enough to try sleeping. I finally dozed off around 5 and slept badly until the alarm went off at 7. We arrived at the courthouse an hour early, even though Gracelyn said we only needed to be there 30 minutes before. I wanted extra time to find the right courtroom and settle my nerves before facing Mom. We passed through metal detectors where security made me remove my belt and empty my pockets into a plastic tray. Lucy's purse went through the scanner twice because she had a water bottle they needed to inspect. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor and found courtroom 3C at the end of a long hallway. The hallway was crowded with other people waiting for family court hearings, and everyone looked stressed and tired. Some people sat on benches staring at their phones while others paced back and forth rehearsing what they planned to say. A woman near us was crying quietly, while an older man who might have been her father patted her shoulder. The whole place smelled like industrial cleaner and anxiety. We found an empty bench and sat down to wait. Mom arrived 15 minutes before our hearing time, and I saw her before she saw me. Her lawyer had already checked in with the clerk according to the board outside the courtroom. She was dressed conservatively in a navy blue dress and low heels instead of her usual casual clothes. Her eyes were red and puffy like she'd been crying all morning, or maybe hadn't slept at all. When she finally spotted me across the hallway, her face crumpled and she looked away quickly. I felt a flash of the old guilt seeing her look so sad and small. For just a second, I wanted to go over there and tell her everything would be okay, like I'd done 1,000 times before. Then I remembered Lucy crying in my car, and the 43 manipulative messages, and Dad's story about the threats and the guilt dissolved into something harder. I looked away from Mom and focused on the courtroom door instead. The clerk called our case number, and we stood up to enter the courtroom. Lucy squeezed my hand once before letting go. We walked through the heavy wooden doors and took seats at the petitioner's table on the left side of the room. Mom and her lawyer sat at the respondent's table across the aisle, and I could feel her staring at me, but I didn't look over. The judge was already at the bench reviewing our file and making notes. She was an older woman with gray hair pulled back and reading glasses perched on her nose. After a few minutes, she looked up and asked me to approach the witness stand to testify first about why I was seeking the restraining order. My legs felt shaky as I walked to the stand and raised my right hand to swear to tell the truth. I took a breath and started walking through the timeline like Gracelyn and I had practiced. I described the girlfriend sabotage that started when I was 14, and Mom threatened to hurt herself if I didn't break up with the girl. I explained how she made me quit band because she said the female teacher was trying to steal me away. I told the judge about prom night when Mom faked chest pains, so I would stay home with her instead of going to the dance. I described Dad's departure when I was 10 and what he told me about Mom's obsession and threats. Then I moved to recent events, starting with bringing Lucy home to meet Mom and the kitchen interrogation. My voice shook at first, but it steadied as I focused on stating facts rather than getting emotional. I mentioned the 43 messages in 1 week, and Mom showing up 2 hours early to our meeting and the campus trespassing incident. I kept my answers short and specific, just like Graceland coached me to do. Mom's lawyer stood up for cross-examination, and his whole strategy was trying to make everything sound like normal parental concern. He asked if it wasn't natural for a mother to worry about her son's romantic relationships. He suggested I might be overreacting to a mother's love and that young people today don't understand how to respect their parents. He asked if I'd considered that Mom was just lonely after Dad left and needed emotional support from her son. I stuck to Graceland's coaching and answered simply without getting defensive or over-explaining. When he asked if threatening self-harm to control my dating life was really that unusual, I looked directly at him and said, "Threatening self-harm to control my dating life isn't normal parental concern." The judge wrote something down when I said that. Mom's lawyer tried a few more questions, but I kept my answers factual and brief, and eventually he sat down looking frustrated. Lucy testified next, and she used her professional voice from when she does presentations at her internship. She described the kitchen interrogation in specific detail, including the questions about her parents' money and whether she was on birth control. She explained that as a mandatory reporter, she recognized the pattern of emotional abuse and boundary violations in what I told her about my childhood. Lucy said she felt compelled to make the report because the behavior met the criteria for psychological harm, even though no physical abuse occurred. She stayed calm and credible the whole time, and I watched the judge taking notes during her testimony. Mom's lawyer tried to cross-examine Lucy, but she didn't get flustered or defensive. She just repeated the facts in the same steady voice until he gave up and sat down. I felt grateful watching her up there speaking clearly about what happened without making it sound dramatic or exaggerated. Deputy Coleman got called to the stand next, and he walked up carrying a tablet with the body camera footage loaded up. He explained that he served the temporary restraining order at Mom's residence, and she became highly emotional and made threatening statements. The judge asked what kind of statements, and Deputy Coleman pulled out his notes and read them directly. Mom had screamed that I was ruining her life and that she was the victim and that Lucy poisoned me against her. The judge asked if the body camera footage captured this interaction, and Deputy Coleman confirmed it did. Graceland stood up and requested that the court view the footage as evidence of Mom's instability and violation of boundaries. Mom's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled him and asked the bailiff to set up the screen. Watching that footage in the courtroom felt weird and painful at the same time. There was Mom on the screen answering her door and Deputy Coleman handing her the papers. Her face went from confused to shocked to completely falling apart in about 5 seconds. She started screaming and crying and saying things that sounded totally unhinged when you heard them played back in a quiet courtroom. The judge watched without any expression on her face and took notes while the video played. When it ended, Deputy Coleman explained that he remained professional throughout and reminded the respondent of the hearing date before leaving. Mom's lawyer tried to cross-examine him, but Deputy Coleman stuck to the facts and his testimony was solid. Then the judge asked if the petitioner had any additional evidence, and Graceland said we had one more witness. Mom's lawyer looked surprised because they clearly didn't know about Dad's declaration. The judge called a 5-minute break before the next phase, and I sat there feeling like my heart was going to explode out of my chest. Lucy reached over and squeezed my hand under the table. When we came back from the break, Graceland stood up and said she wanted to present a written declaration from my father. She handed copies to the judge and to Mom's lawyer, and I watched Mom's face go white. The judge started reading Dad's declaration, and the courtroom got completely silent, except for the sound of pages turning. Dad had written everything out in detail starting from when I was born, and Mom refused to let him help with basic baby care. He described how she told him I was her son, not our son, and how she pushed him away from every parenting moment. Then he got into the stuff from when I was 8, and how he found her in my bed holding me inappropriately. He wrote about the threats she made when he tried to stop it, and how she said she would tell everyone he was abusing me if he tried to take me away. The judge kept reading, and her expression got more serious with each page. When she finished, she looked up at Mom's lawyer and asked if he had any response to these allegations about past threats and manipulation. Mom's lawyer shuffled through his papers looking totally lost, and finally said he was not aware of this history and would need time to consult with his client. The judge said that wouldn't be necessary and asked if the respondent wished to testify on her own behalf. Mom's lawyer leaned over and whispered to her for a minute, and then told the judge that yes, she wanted to testify. Mom stood up and walked to the witness stand, and before the bailiff even finished swearing her in, she started crying. She told the judge she was a devoted mother who sacrificed everything for her son after his father abandoned them. She said she never threatened anyone, and I was confused because Lucy had manipulated me and turned me against my own mother. Her voice got louder and higher with each sentence, and she kept looking at me like she was begging me to stop this. The judge let her talk for a few minutes and then held up her hand. She redirected Mom to answer specific questions about the documented incidents instead of making general statements. She asked about the 43 messages in 1 week, and Mom said she was just worried about me. The judge asked about showing up 2 hours early to our meeting, and Mom said she was excited to see me. Then the judge asked about the campus trespassing incident, and Mom's story started falling apart. She claimed she was just checking on me because I wasn't answering her calls, but the judge pointed out that I was an adult and had the right not to answer. Mom started talking about Lucy again and saying she corrupted me, and the judge interrupted her firmly. She told Mom to stick to answering the questions asked and not speculate about other people's motives. Mom couldn't explain away any of the evidence, and her answers got more desperate and less believable. Her lawyer tried to object a few times, but the judge shut him down. Finally, the judge said she had heard enough testimony and needed to review all the evidence. She announced a 10-minute recess, and everyone stood up as she left the courtroom. I walked out into the hallway with Lucy and Gracelyn and felt like I was going to throw up. My hands were shaking and my stomach was doing flips, and I couldn't tell if the hearing went well or terrible. Gracelyn put her hand on my shoulder and said the hearing went very well and the evidence was strong. She explained that the judge saw through Mom's manipulation tactics, and the body camera footage plus Dad's declaration were powerful proof of the pattern. Lucy stood close to me and I could feel her warmth, but I couldn't relax until I heard the actual ruling. Those 10 minutes felt like 10 hours. We went back into the courtroom and sat down, and the judge came back out. She looked at both sides and started speaking in a calm, clear voice. She said she reviewed all the evidence, including witness testimony, police reports, message documentation, and the declaration from my father. Based on the pattern of harassment, emotional manipulation, and violation of the temporary order, she was granting a 1-year no-contact restraining order. Mom was prohibited from any contact with me directly or through third parties and had to stay 100 yards away at all times. Any violation would result in immediate arrest. The judge kept talking and explaining the terms carefully while looking directly at Mom. She outlined the penalties for violations and said this order was effective immediately. Mom started sobbing loudly, and her lawyer had to steady her in her chair. The judge's expression stayed firm, and she didn't look moved by Mom's crying at all. She finished reading the order and asked if both parties understood the terms. I said yes, and Mom just kept crying. The judge signed the final order and handed it to the bailiff and said court was dismissed. Everyone stood up and I grabbed the certified copy of the restraining order from the clerk's desk. Lucy and I walked toward the hallway, and I could hear Mom still crying behind us. In the hallway, Mom tried to approach me while tears ran down her face. She reached out toward me and her voice cracked when she said, "Please, you're my baby." Deputy Coleman stepped between us before she could get close and reminded her the order was in effect immediately. I kept my eyes down and didn't look at her face. Lucy took my arm and we walked toward the elevator. I felt hollow instead of happy or relieved. We got in my car and drove straight back to our apartment without talking much. The U-Haul was still parked outside and we had a few more boxes to load. We worked in exhausted silence, carrying the last items down the stairs. I kept the restraining order folded in my pocket and touched it every few minutes to make sure it was real. This piece of paper was legal proof that I had the right to be free from her. We finished loading everything by evening and locked up the empty apartment. The drive to our new state took 8 hours and we barely talked for the first half. Both of us were processing what happened in court and trying to wrap our heads around the fact that we actually did it. The highway stretched out ahead of us, and I kept checking the mirrors like Mom might appear behind us, even though I knew she couldn't. Somewhere around hour 5, Lucy reached over and squeezed my hand. I looked at her and she gave me this small, tired smile. That's when I realized we were actually doing this. We were leaving everything behind and starting over in a place where Mom couldn't find us. We pulled into the parking lot around midnight, and the apartment complex looked quiet and dark. Lucy grabbed the lighter boxes while I hauled the heavier ones up 2 flights of stairs to Unit 214. The apartment smelled like fresh paint and carpet cleaner and had that empty echo that new places always have. We worked without talking much because we were both too tired for conversation. I dropped a box labeled kitchen in the middle of the living room floor and looked around at our tiny 1-bedroom with its basic white walls and standard rental fixtures. The place was maybe 600 square feet total, but it was ours, and nobody here knew Mom or had any connection to my old life. Lucy set down the last box and leaned against the doorframe looking exhausted. We still had the U-Haul to return in the morning, but for now we just stood there in our empty apartment surrounded by cardboard boxes. Something about being here in this small space with Lucy made me think maybe we could actually build something normal. I unrolled our mattress in the bedroom and we collapsed on it fully clothed without even bothering to find sheets. The next morning we tackled the IKEA bookshelf we bought 2 weeks ago. Lucy insisted we should follow the instructions step by step, while I thought we could just figure it out by looking at the pictures. She spread out all the pieces on the living room floor and started sorting screws into little piles. I grabbed 2 panels and tried to fit them together without checking the diagram. We argued about it for 10 minutes before Lucy started laughing at how stupid we were being over a cheap bookshelf. I started laughing too, and we ended up sitting on the floor giggling like idiots while surrounded by particle board and Allen wrenches. We finally finished the bookshelf using the instructions and ordered pizza because neither of us had energy to cook. The pizza place didn't deliver, so I walked 3 blocks to pick it up and carried it back in the dark. We ate sitting on the living room floor with the bookshelf as our only furniture, and it felt more like home than anywhere I lived with Mom ever did. I set up my laptop on a cardboard box the next day and logged into the telehealth portal. Francine's face appeared on screen, and she asked how the move went and how I was feeling after the hearing. I told her I felt empty instead of happy about winning the restraining order. She nodded like she expected that answer and said, "Feeling empty is normal when you finally escape something that consumed your whole life. Grief and relief can exist at the same time," she explained. We talked about the hearing and how watching Mom cry on the stand made me feel guilty, even though I knew she manipulated people with tears my entire childhood. Francine helped me understand that my emotional reactions were conditioned responses from years of training and that unlearning them would take time. The session lasted 50 minutes, and afterward, I felt less confused about why I wasn't celebrating. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad later that afternoon. The message said he found an old photo from when I was 6 and wanted to share it. The image loaded slowly and showed both of us at a beach building a sandcastle together. Dad looked younger and happier in the photo, and I looked like a normal kid having fun with his father. His text said he was glad I was safe and that he was here whenever I was ready to talk. I stared at that photo for a long time, trying to remember that day at the beach. We texted back and forth and agreed to start with monthly video calls and no pressure about rebuilding our relationship. He said we could take it slow and be honest about what we both needed. I saved the photo to my phone and felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight for years. 2 weeks after we moved in, a letter arrived at our new address forwarded through Graceland's office. The envelope had Mom's handwriting on it, and my stomach dropped when I recognized it. The letter inside went on for 3 pages, mixing apologies with blame and begging me to just talk to her. She wrote that she never meant to hurt me and that Lucy had poisoned my mind against her. She said the restraining order was unfair and that I was her only family, and how could I abandon her like this? The letter ended with her asking me to call her so we could work things out. I read it once, sitting at our kitchen table, and then folded it back into the envelope. The restraining order prohibited any contact, and I wasn't going to give her an opening by responding. I filed the letter in a folder with all the other legal documents and didn't think about it again that day. The financial reality of our move hit hard when I checked our bank account. We burned through most of our savings on deposits and moving costs and had maybe 2 months of rent left. I applied for a part-time job at the campus bookstore near Lucy's new school and got hired to work 20 hours a week. Lucy dropped her elective class so she could work more hours at her internship, which paid slightly above minimum wage. We sat down with our budget spreadsheet and cut everything that wasn't essential. No eating out except special occasions, no new clothes, no entertainment subscriptions we didn't absolutely need. The math was tight, but it worked if we both stuck to the plan and nothing unexpected happened. Lucy squeezed my hand across the table and said we were making it work through teamwork. I believed her even though the numbers scared me. 6 weeks after the move, I woke up one morning and realized I slept through the entire night without nightmares. I lay there in bed next to Lucy trying to remember the last time that happened and couldn't. The constant anxiety that used to wake me up at 3 a.m. was gone. I stopped jumping every time someone knocked on our apartment door. My stomach didn't clench anymore when my phone rang with an unknown number. These were small signs, but they meant something was changing inside me. I was actually healing instead of just surviving. Lucy woke up and asked why I was smiling, and I told her I slept all night. She smiled back and said that was good and rolled over to go back to sleep. I opened my phone that afternoon and scrolled to Mom's contact. Her number was still saved with a photo from 5 years ago, when she looked younger and happier. I made sure all her messages were backed up and archived per Graceland's instructions for legal compliance. Then I deleted her contact completely. Watching her name disappear from my phone felt like dropping something heavy I had been carrying for years. She could still call from her number, but seeing her name wouldn't pop up anymore. That small action made me feel more free than I expected. Deputy Coleman sent me an email later that week confirming the case was closed on their end. He wrote that Mom hadn't violated the restraining order since the hearing and that no further action was needed. He included contact information for our new local police department in case Mom ever showed up here or violated the order. Having that safety net in place helped me relax another small degree. I forwarded the email to Lucy and Graceland so everyone had the updated information. The case being officially closed felt like one more piece of the past getting filed away where it belonged. Lucy and I went out for our first real date since the move on a Saturday night. We drove to a Thai restaurant she found online that had good reviews and cheap prices. The food was spicy and good, and we ate slowly without rushing or worrying about anything. After dinner, we walked through a park near the restaurant that we had never seen before. The park had walking paths and old trees and felt peaceful in the evening light. We talked about her classes and my bookstore job and what we wanted to do next year. For the first time in months, we discussed future plans instead of past trauma. I realized while we walked that I was actually excited about what came next instead of scared. Lucy noticed me smiling and asked what I was thinking about. I told her I was just happy to be here with her, and she squeezed my hand. We drove back to our apartment and spent the rest of the night watching some comedy show on Netflix. My phone started buzzing on the coffee table around 9, and I picked it up to see a blocked number flashing on the screen. I watched it ring once, twice, 3 times before I let it go to voicemail. Lucy glanced over at me and asked if I was going to check it, but I just shook my head and waited. The voicemail notification popped up a minute later, and I put it on speaker. Nothing came through except breathing for about 15 seconds before the line went dead. I saved the voicemail and called the local police department to file a report about a possible restraining order violation. The officer who answered took down all my information and said they would document it in case Mom tried anything else. I blocked that number in my phone before we went back to the show. The next week, I had my regular video session with Francine, and we spent most of the hour talking about trust. I told her I was scared Lucy would eventually see me as too broken or too much work and leave. Francine leaned forward on her screen and pointed out that Lucy had already seen me at my absolute worst during the court hearing and everything with Mom. She chose to stay through all of that chaos. She moved to a new state with me. That was what real love actually looked like, not the sick version Mom tried to sell me my whole life. The session helped me see that pushing Lucy away because I was scared of being abandoned was just another way Mom's damage was controlling my choices. 3 months after the restraining order hearing, I got an email from my college with my midterm grades attached. I opened it expecting the usual struggle, but every grade was better than last semester. 2 A's and 2 B's when I used to barely pull C's while managing Mom's constant emotional emergencies. I sat there staring at my laptop screen and realized how much mental space she had taken up in my brain. All that energy I used to spend worrying about her feelings or predicting her next breakdown was now going toward actually learning things in my classes. It felt weird to succeed at something without her voice in my head, telling me I was abandoning her by focusing on the school. On Tuesday evening, Lucy brought home Chinese food, and we sat on our living room floor with the containers spread out between us. Some action movie played on the TV, but neither of us really watched it. We just ate and talked about normal things like her annoying coworker and my upcoming essay deadline. I grabbed an egg roll and felt this calm wash over me that I had never experienced before. The blocked call from last week did not make me jump at every unknown number anymore. Mom's letter sat filed away in a folder where it could not hurt me. I was building an actual life here with Lucy that belonged to me instead of to Mom's sickness. It was messy, and we were still broke and figuring things out, but it was genuinely mine for the first time ever.